Hi, I'm Lewis,
And I'm Susanna.
and this is Switched Media.
Hi everyone, welcome back. We're on Zoom again this week, as you can see. Thanks to the fact that this week's visitor is really exciting. We have someone joining us from overseas. I'd like to introduce Tomisin Joseph from London in the UK. Tomisin is a freelance runner currently over there and also a content creator on YouTube. And we're super excited to have her here to talk about her experiences working in the industry over in the UK and some of the things that she's experienced while she's been over there working there for a bit over about a year and a half kind of thing you said. So welcome, Tomisin. And we'd love to hear, just kind of give us a brief overview of what it is that you do. And yeah.
Hi, I'm Tomisin. I'm a runner and I make YouTube videos as well. So yeah, a runner is basically like an assistant. You just have to do any jobs that they ask you to. And I also do a bit of researching as well.
So in terms of some of the like projects that you've worked on in the past and things, could you let us know kind of a little bit about what you've done there and what your role's been like within those projects and things?
Yeah, so the work that I've done so far has sort of been mainly based around branded content and adverts. Usually involves doing a bit of research, getting ready for the actual shoot, and then on the day, being assistant wherever people need help, just, helping out. So yeah, I've worked on like campaigns for Innocent. I've worked on Instagram pilot shows. I did a YouTube original show, which was called Birthday Song with Lewis Capaldi. That one was very like research heavy. More recently, I've worked in like entertainment in TV, doing shows such as like Supermarket Sweep, Family Fortunes, and yeah, that sort of thing.
I will jump in and ask a question. Branded content. What's the most like? Has it been like a super obscure way to advertise a brand through like a branded content that you've come across? So has it been like a situation for you and your experiences where like you've been given a project or a job where it's been like wow, like is this obscurely obvious branded content?
Yeah. Well, generally the projects that I've worked on that are branded content projects, they're branded. Like it's
Yeah.
supposed to be this company is sponsoring this person and they'll mention it throughout the show. I don't think we've done anything that's
Subtle.
supposed to be covert, I guess. Yeah. Generally it's either for the brand, so like hence branded content like Innocent, or it will be a character or a celebrity and a brand is coming together to give you this piece of content. Yeah.
So I know that you do some work on YouTube, you do some own DIY kind of fashion videos and things. In terms of like the differences between the way you've seen YouTube run in terms of the way people create content, not just yourself, but the way other people create content versus the way you've seen content created in the more formal structures of the television industry, kind of, what, like, is there much difference there? Are those experiences and processes starting to become more similar?
Yeah, I mean, the way I create content, I do a lot of planning still. I do a bit of research, but I think it can be very spontaneous if I want it to be. With the TV industry, what I've found so far is that everything has a very specific process, and if it's a show that's got a specific format, there's no straying from that. If there's a show, for instance, that you want to put on at a particular time of day, and that audiences love a particular character as a daytime character, then more often than not, I think that companies will go for that obvious choice rather than trying out new talent or trying to see if they can sort of film things in a way that will appeal to like younger people, for instance. I don't think there's as much flexibility in the way that they approach work. I have found that working on a YouTube show, there is a little bit more room to take risks, but then at the end of the day, there'll still be a massive sort of sign-off sheet of particular shots that you have to have gotten, or particular, I don't know, there are things that you're allowed to say and you're not allowed to say and things like that. So I think I found that when I create content, I like to have a sort of general idea of what I want to do. But then at the end of the day, if I get something good when I'm out filming that I think is a bit different or could be interesting, it's a lot easier for me to put that in, probably because I'm only relying on myself. Like I
Mm.
don't really have anybody to answer to.
You got that creativity, like the the freeness of your own creativity.
Yeah,
Creativity, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, like everything that I'm trying to do will probably adhere to a brand that I've made for myself. Whereas obviously if you're working for someone else, you've got the general public to take into their opinions, you've got execs and bosses, and even things such as like sourcing music for videos versus sourcing music for shows and adverts. There's a bigger process that you have to go through to get that in in a TV show or in a branded content piece. And sometimes there can be a little bit of politics with that as well. People don't just release songs to be used just like that. They obviously want to get something out of it as well. So that can add a long time onto the process of creating your piece of content. Whereas if it was just me, I would go onto YouTube and like use an audio library, or I'd use like websites like Thematic and stuff and see who's giving out their music for free, and take what I can, essentially. That I don't really necessarily have to answer to anybody on that hand. So yeah, there is definitely a different ways of working, and I think people have found it hard. Like people in the industry are aware that digital media is very popular, especially amongst younger people, and there's a little bit of a growth period that I personally think is happening right now, where they're trying to merge ways of working in terms of digital content with ways of working in traditional TV. So that's especially in like different cases. I've seen them use YouTube talent for mainstream TV shows. That's sort of a crossover that I'm starting to see happen like more often now, which I personally find quite interesting, being a fan of like both ways of watching content.
Yeah, because we often hear like you often get the narrative that, you know, everything's moving to digital, and old, more traditional styles are dead and the studios are dead and it's all going to be
Yeah.
YouTube and Netflix these days. But I think people underestimate the power that those places still have, and the fact that, that works still.
I've never really understood personally why, like in the UK, they like to make a differentiation between digital content and mainstream TV content, but digital in terms of not things that like creators like myself would be doing on YouTube, but Netflix said make a differentiation between Netflix content and then things that you might see on like BBC and ITV. But I think it's weird because at the end of the day, most people are watching both things on their laptop. There are differences in the way that both types of content are made. Like I think from what I've heard, they seem to be pumping a lot more money into like TV shows made for Amazon Prime or TV shows made for Netflix. But at the end of the day, for me, like content is content, TV shows are TV shows. It doesn't really matter where I'm watching it. But there is that differentiation for sure. Like you won't find as many production companies that make shows for like Channel 4 or ITV or like broadcasters also making content for Netflix. It'll be companies that do like branded content, which will be more willing to reach out and try and make content for Netflix.
Something that I found out that I had no idea about until I was in the UK last year, and we were at the British Film Institute talking with someone there, and explained about the way the BBC is funded and the television licenses you guys have over there. Would you be able to explain what a television license is?
So basically, as I understand it, the BBC is a public funded broadcaster. So we all sort of pay a little bit of money to be able to watch TV in general, but especially the BBC, a lot of the money goes there. So in that way, they have to make more of a consideration for the public and what they think the public want to see. They can't just sort of stream anything that's popular. It has to be TV show that benefits the UK public in a way. And so I think because of that, they do have a very sort of rigid set of guidelines of what they can say on TV or what they can show on their channels and stuff like that.
It's the same in Germany. When I was living there for a bit, you have to pay, I think it's €14 to public fund media, really.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it's something like like almost £100 or something.
Yeah.
100
It's like
pounds
£100
or
something a year.
for your
Yeah.
TV license, because over here that's not a thing. Like, you have to pay for your TV. Basically, you plug your TV into the TV cable, and you press go, and the channels appear, and it's all there's a certain number of channels that you just can stream for free.
And it's all rubbish.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Most Australian television is reality, and that's not necessarily a good thing. We have more forms of The Bachelor than I think ever exists in ever. But yeah, like we can just stream whatever we want that's there, and then if we want those further channels, we have to pay for things like a Foxtel subscription or something, which is a company that has all the other channels that
is that like a Sky subscription?
That's exactly what it is.
Basically. So it gives us access to things like, if we want to watch US sports, then you can get onto the channels and live watch US like basketball games, or if you want to watch the only legal way to watch Game of Thrones in Australia was to have a Foxtel subscription, which meant you had to get a Foxtel box and like get a full-on one, or you could get, now they've got their online streaming service, which was like $30 a month. Which is significant. It was it's $25 a month, which is significantly more than Netflix or
we had, I think, to watch Game of Thrones here you had to have Sky essentially, or else you couldn't watch it the same way as well.
One of the things that we've been talking about in most of our episodes now, particularly I guess because we've been talking about different aspects of representation as well, and obviously that's been mostly focused on Australian screens, but I think I think from the things that I've seen, there seems to be the UK's been on top of the representation thing for a while. We were talking with our episode and Sarah about like the LGBTQ plus representation and the massive effects that Queer as Folk had back about 20 something years ago when that came out, and the fact that shows like that revolutionized things over there but have only come through still haven't really come through on Australian screens. In terms of the content that you see and everything, where is the diversity and representation aspect kind of at in the UK at the moment?
I think it's an interesting one. I think that I think in terms of representation, it definitely has improved over the years. You definitely see a lot more like black and brown faces on TV than you might have before. And, people are taking a chance on new talent that maybe like the general public don't know about, but are very popular within different communities. Like, I think that's definitely something that I've seen improve. I don't know whether I'd say, it's obviously not perfect, but I think especially when it comes to representation, it can often be quite a long process to get new like there's often an issue with getting new talent on screens, and that when I've spoken to different people in the industry and suggested ideas of who they can use to front different campaigns and stuff, there's often this talk of, oh well, the public don't know them, oh no, they're not like a classic character. And so it seems like in terms of getting representation on screens, it's a case of, it's also linked to being willing to try new things and try new talent. I think representation is very important because there's a certain impact that comes from being able to see people that look like you, who act like you, who think like you, succeeding and being portrayed in positive lights, which that's also key. There's one thing having representation and seeing people that look like you, but also another thing about having characters that doing positive things and they're not just sort of fulfilling some sort of stereotype. But yeah, to go back to my point, I think increasing representation on screens is also very much linked to broadcasters' willingness to take risks as well, which they end up bringing back to money again, in that no one wants to take a risk and then find that their show bombs, and then they end up blaming it on their talent who's new. So I think definitely I've seen more shows that have more representation, or even shows that allow talent from different places and different like niches in society to shine on screen. But yeah, no, I would say that generally, in terms of the faces that I see on screen, it has changed over over the course of my lifetime, I guess. But yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point you made about the fact that they said that's not what the audience wants. I think that suggests a interesting viewpoint of the studios to say that they don't think that they've got an audience for that, because the fact of the matter is that audiences have always been diverse, but like the audiences that have access to these to TV and programs and everything is incredibly diverse. And I think it's very limiting for the studios actually, and for these companies to be suggesting that their audiences don't want to see new things and different faces, because that's suggesting that they've got one audience from one demographic, when in actual fact, perhaps if they started broadening their content, they might find themselves having much broader audiences, which is never a bad thing. Like, it's never a bad thing to reach more people, right? And I think that it's, you know, to say, well, audiences don't want that is actually to contradict all of the amazing things that have come out over the last like 5 to 10 years that show that audiences are so incredibly thirsty. Like they are dying for more content that more accurately represents, you know, the world that we live in. And I know we were talking about this in our first episode. We talked about Mulan coming to Disney Plus, and we started talking about some of the interesting things that have come through with that in terms of, you know, the representation or lack of representation in certain choices in terms of the people that they chose to come in on the crew for Mulan, and, you know, not choosing an Asian director and all those kinds of things. And we used the comparison of Black Panther and the way that like, you know, that film was responded to in a way that was just, you know, insane. And that, you know, so many of these places like, oh, well, audiences don't want it. And you go, well, what about this? What about that? What about, you know, all of these things that have come out that actually prove, no, actually audiences do want it, and they're willing to pay for it as well. Like,
yeah, I think it's quite interesting as well. Sometimes, like, it's weird because this is a little bit of a digression, to be honest, but I find it interesting that you mentioned the point about you know, Mulan not using an Asian director and things like that, and that sometimes I feel like you can tell when a show has been sort of produced, like a show has been made and they've sort of put like a black or a brown presenter at the front of it to sort of increase the look of diversity, or the look of, you know, trying to connect to more people. But you can tell when they've done it, but the team behind doesn't reflect that, because you often find in like the writing styles and sort of the jokes they tell, it can, you'll see the difference. Sometimes you'll feel the difference. I guess it's one of those things that can't really be explained, but if you compare that to like recently, one of the last projects I worked on was a project where I'd never seen more like black or brown crew members, which was really, it was quite shocking for me, to be honest, because yeah, like there was a black sound operator, there was a black guy working the jib, and then obviously there was me as well. And I thought that you know, it's nice to be in that environment where you can see that they're trying to increase like diversity on screen as well as off screen, because there are loads of like black and brown people who want to work in TV, maybe for different reasons they haven't chosen to go into it, but there are like loads of black writers, for instance, who want to be able to tell their stories on screen, and you can tell when a story is coming from an authentic source versus when it's just given the look of authenticity but not necessarily actually translating it with the words.
Sarah was saying similar things in regards to the LGBTQ plus representation and things, of the fact that, you know, it doesn't, you know, just putting someone on screen doesn't make what you're doing accurate. And, you know, so often it actually results in perpetuating of certain stereotypes rather than, you know, showing the very, very broad range of narratives that exist within every minority and every culture and every community, no matter how big or small, though there was always such a broad range.
That's why there's a British show that came out recently, basically. So there's this amazing sort of like writer director in the UK called Michaela Cole, and she recently came out with a TV show called I May Destroy You, which was on the BBC. And what I really liked about that show is, even though there were aspects to it that I couldn't necessarily relate to, because it told a story about, it was a bit autobiographical, where she told the story of a lady who's like writing. She takes a break from writing, goes for a night out, and she ends up getting like drugged and sexually assaulted, and then she sort of has to work through that for the rest of the season. But what I liked about it was that a lot of the Black characters in the show, they weren't portrayed with some sort of I guess stereotype in mind. They were portrayed as normal people, which is like, you notice when a Black character is being portrayed to play someone who like maybe only talks about race, or they're only there to be like a supporting character's best friend, or you know, they're like a drug dealer or something. The Black characters in this show were just literally normal people with good aspects to them and also bad aspects to them, and it was quite refreshing. Like, I didn't realize that it would have such an impact on me until I saw that show, and I was like, oh yeah, like this is how it should be. This is how they should just write regular characters, rather than writing people to give like some ulterior message or motive, or you know, like those sorts of things to them. It's good to have Black and brown characters that are just characters, and their character doesn't revolve around them being Black. And I think Michaela Cole writing that show obviously helped with that perspective, because I don't know her writing process, but I imagine she didn't have to think too much about creating a character that was Black. She just created a character and they were Black. So yeah, that show was particularly impactful. It was good in teaching a message as well. There was a lot of things that made people, like, it started a lot of conversations around like sexual assault and things like that, which I think a lot of people benefited from. But also, yeah, the characters were just characters. They weren't characters to show that, oh, Black people can be this or Black people aren't this. They were just characters, which was really refreshing and nice to watch. Yeah.
I always think you can, you know, you can tell when you're watching a movie and people have been cast because they walked in and they were the best person for that part, regardless of, you know, race, sexuality, religion, any of those things. They were cast because they came in and they gave the best, you know, portrayal of this character.
That's not to write out like their nuances as well that are specific to them because of their different characteristics, but it's like, yeah, not making that the main focus,
not making that
and that's their only contribution. Yeah, exactly. Like, you can definitely tell the difference when a character is written because, you know, they want a Black woman on screen versus they want a woman who, you know, has a story where they fall in love, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and they're also a Black woman. So, you know, they bring that
therefore,
too.
the way the story happens might be different than the way it would happen if it was an Asian woman or a Muslim.
Yeah,
and those representations offer great opportunities for people to, you know, learn new things. And, you know, I think that a lot more people need to be more, and I know I need to be more conscious of, you know, confronting my own, you know, biases and things. And one of the great ways of doing that is to show it on TV, you know, seeing more positive and just natural, normal representation, you know, it not being a big thing, but it just being, this is what you see, can surely only positively affect the biases that people have.
Yeah, I think, yeah, having positive representation, I think, is also very key. Like, for instance, I know that in America they like to make a lot of like slave movies. I guess that's an important part of their history. But I always find it very fascinating when you know, they have a lot of Black talent, but they always end up playing those roles in those movies. And I think that sort of representation doesn't allow like young Black kids to see themselves within characters and see themselves in a way that's that has positives to them, because obviously that's a very traumatic part of history, and it's hard to find everyday moments where you can be like, oh my gosh, I want to relate to this, or, you know, what would this character do, let me play it out, when characters that have similar characteristics to you are only being portrayed in that way. I don't think that's not to say to, you know, rewrite history and like film things, like, you know, deny deny the past and stuff. But I think with Black Panther, that was really significant because a lot of young kids who were into superheroes and a lot of young kids who, well, you know, even if they weren't Black, like they found those characters to be really moving and really inspiring and quite powerful. And they finally found something that they can, you know, kids can, like young Black kids can say, oh yeah, I want to be this character from Black Panther, in the, you know, in the playground and stuff like that.
It's not about forgetting and erasing what happened in the past. It's accepting that, you know, what happened in the past was important and it happened, but we're also in the present.
Yeah, you don't need to make 101 movies that just show trauma all the time. Like it's quite a lot. But even me, like I found Black Panther quite significant. I'm not a Marvel movie fan necessarily, and before watching it, I was just like, oh my gosh, what's all this hype? Like, who really, like, you know, is this just going to be another sort of tokenistic movie where they're saying, oh look, we can put Black people on screen, it's cool. But then when I was watching it, I was like, no, this is actually pretty sick, you know, like. Even though, like I said, I'm not a Marvel fan, but there are ways that they made the characters interact that I was like, yeah, that's something like me and my friends would do. That makes me proud to, like, it makes me proud to be Black, seeing Black people achieve like significant things on screen. And I was quite taken aback by my own reaction because I was like, this is all corny, like the way everybody's getting all excited. But I found myself getting excited afterwards, like while watching it, because I was like, yeah, finally, you know, there are Black people on screen that are like having a positive impact, are being seen as, in a way that more of us can relate to, because this is how, you know, we live our lives, how we talk to our friends and things like that. So yeah, I found that quite interesting as well.
Well, you know, I guess we can only hope that this is just the first of many, many, many movies and shows that people are going to get to have that experience with, and that, you know, one day, you know, the next generation that's going to be, you know, the 2 generations or 3 generations down will get to have that feeling with, you know, so many movies that they get to go see.
But I was also going to say, I feel like an example of I think an example of bad representation is Ocean's 8, because I was really into like Ocean's 11 and all those films, and like I think the way that like George Clooney and Brad Pitt interacted was quite funny. It was quite, you know, it was cool. But then I felt like when they made Ocean's 8, they were just like, let's make a movie that's just like the male movie, but just slap in female characters, but without any sort of nuance to their personality. Let's try and make them copy what Brad Pitt and George Clooney do, and like copy all their storylines and make every punchline about them being able to do things because they're women. I thought that was really terrible, and it sort of made everything just seem really tokenistic, I guess, and just sort of like it's almost as if they said, let's make a woman empowerment movie, but without giving women any actual individual characters or roles. So yeah, I just thought I'd put that in. I have a very big vendetta against that.
I kind of felt that watching that one too, and like I think that's interesting to go back to like the superhero side. I felt the opposite in Captain Marvel. Like for me, watching Captain Marvel, it was a moment of, you know, I like just loved the movie. I didn't necessarily think of anything while I was watching it. I was just like, this is such an epically awesome movie. But then afterwards, I was sitting there and I was hearing and seeing all these conversations about, oh, well, it was just ridiculous. And as if, you know, it was over the top and the powers were too much and everything. And, you know, they like, you know, as if these things actually happen. And there was so many people like being like, this doesn't happen. I'm like, okay, but that's not how you respond to a Bond movie. It's not how you respond to Iron Man or Thor. Like, no, actually, I was watching that movie and I just accepted it because I was like, yes, like this is an awesome movie and she's going. And I never stopped to think those powers are excessive, because I don't think that when I watch a Thor movie. And it was that idea of, you know, a movie that instead of like, it was her own movie and it wasn't just like the exact same copy as, you know, it wasn't like they just made, you know, the female Iron Man. It was her own character and she was her and there. And that for me was like, yeah, you know, we finally get to see a superhero that's kicking ass who's female and showing that, you know, you can be just as powerful and, you know, caring and everything, and it's all one big thing. And so, you know.
Yeah, it's way more impactful in that way when the character, like, same again with characters of different races and stuff, when the character's storyline is so solid that, you know, if you're a Black person, you're watching it and you relate and you see that they're Black, like that's a plus. But anybody can sort of relate because they've still given them their own storylines and their own backgrounds and stuff. It makes a difference, like you can definitely tell.
Thank you. You had some really insightful things to say, some really interesting things. I'm sure there's a lot of people that may not necessarily know so much about the way the UK industry works and things, and some of the differences between YouTube and traditional media and how those things are playing out. And then certainly the representation thing, we've had some people talking about how impactful it's been for them to get to see someone talking about an issue that they relate to. So hopefully this episode will also relate to some of the people that are watching it and give that voice. We're certainly trying to give voice to the people that can actually speak for people's experiences. So thank you for coming in and for coming
Thanks
in.
for having me, guys.
Yes. giving up your time and coming. It's been great.
It's all right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And then just for anyone watching, as always, our social medias will be in the description box below. Chuck us a like, a subscribe, go back and have a look at some of the episodes we've discussed. Definitely highly recommend the episodes with Sarah and with Will that have come up in the last couple of weeks. Really insightful conversations that I think are really important to be having around a very broad range of new perspectives on issues about representation that I think hopefully will give some people some new insights. So definitely go and check those out. Thanks again, Tomisin, and we'll catch you guys next time.